Okay. So, like I said, I came back from London and I was back in my hometown living in my mum's house. And I wasn't working and I had kind of sort of like bummed out, I guess. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just hanging around, kind of walking and doing my kind of meditation. And I'd carved my own rune stones. I was quite interested in Nordic traditions and magic. I quite that divination. I was interested in it, so I tried to follow a little bit. I'm not good at doing any of these things, but I tried anyway, and I carved my own rune stones, and I was trying to work with them, meditating on the rune stones to try and get the meaning from them, reading books, and I thought that was another part of my kind of scheme, that if I ever travel, I could do like, divination, the rune stones for helping people, and the crystals. I had lots of crystals. While this was going on, if we go back maybe a couple of months, and this is when I was coming back to my hometown in Bellshill. I had been living in Lancaster on campus there with some friends, and that was kind of in between London and going back to Scotland. So when I came back from Scotland, this is when things kicked off Krishna consciously as well. For me, although I saw a devotee, I don't want to say like I saw a devotee when I was young, but I did. My gran lived in London, and as a young kid, before I was even 10, we would go to London quite regularly and stay there to see my gran. It was my father's mother. And then we would be on Oxford Street and things. And I remember, it's quite clear in my mind, I remember seeing the devotees were on the other side of the street, Oxford Street, and they would come down Harry Namal jumping. And as a young kid, of course, I didn't take any notice, but I just know that I remember that I saw them. Now, where I heard Hare Krishna mantra, I don't know, but I do remember seeing them. That's like the first time, I guess, my eyes, like even subconsciously, saw the devotees. So where I heard the holy name then, I don't know, but as we understand from the philosophy then, by hearing the mantra or come in contact with devotees, we gain certain impressions which then help us for other unfolding of spiritual life. So it may have been then, in this lifetime anyway, in this body, I don't know, but certainly I remember that, not clearly, but even today I can think at the time when I looked across the road and I can see all the orange. It's a bit of a blur now, and people jumping up and down, and I could hear the kartals ching ching ching, But anyway, this is later on. I'm coming back from Lancaster, and I got off the train. I go Lancaster to Glasgow, and Glasgow to Bellshill, and I got off the train in Bellshill, and I'm walking down the road. So there's a big long stretch going to where my kind of like housing scheme is at the edge of a park, and it's all open grass. And at that time, of course, I'd already lost my hair when I was young. When I was 15, I started going a little bit bald, and by the time I was 18, it was almost see-through. And then when I joined the band later on, we were in London, they said to me, "Why don't you just shave off and have a ponytail?" So I thought, it's a bit strange, but okay, I'll do that. So I went to a fancy hairdressers. They shaved my head all off, my hair, and I had this like bit of hair, and they put extensions in, and later on it kind of turned to kind of dreadlocks, and I put beads in it. No, so I had all this ornamented kind of like a Sika cloth the hair. I didn't know what it was. It was just it was just my kind of thing. For me, it was quite unique, so it made me unique. It made me feel like I was a little bit different. So that was good for me. And so of course I'm walking down the road to go home, and there's a small boy, a young kid, maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, I don't know, and he shouts for about 100 yards, "Gauranga!" And I'm looking at him. Of course, I haven't got a clue what I'm looking round, and look, there's a big hill, the old coal bin where they put all the slurry, from the coal mining, because it was a coal mining town. They have these bings where I come from. They call them bings. It's basically old hills from all the stuff that would take out the mines. But then, of course, the grass and all that grows over them, and they just look like a hill. But in Scotland, they're called bings. So I'm looking up the bing as if there's somebody he knows, and there's something going on here. No, that's just me. I thought, quite strange. I don't know what Gauranga was. I didn't even remember the word. I only remember it at the time, and later on when I found out there was a word Gauranga, I thought, oh, that's why he shouted at me. And it's because he saw my ponytail. And what I didn't know, that the week before coming back, the devotees from the temple in Scotland had just had a festival in my hometown, Bellsilla, in one of the halls. And of course they had put posters up, Gauranga Festival, and obviously they probably had done a Harinam on the street, and probably knowing them had got like kids and all that to shout Gauranga and gave them Gauranga stickers, you know, the whole thing, as you do. So these kids were all Gauranga'd, you know, so therefore they saw me with a wee funny tuft of hair, and they just put two and two together and thought I was part of the team. So that was that one day, and this is kind of in between everything happened. That was that one day, and it was some days after that I was walking up the main street, and I met a girl who's a good friend. It was like my first girlfriend, and we're good friends, and I hadn't saw her obviously since I was about 17, and it was really nice to see her. And we were standing talking to her, and of course when she knew me I had hair, you know, and she looked and she went, oh, have you joined the Hare Krishnas? Now, of course, I didn't know who the Hare Krishnas were. I mean, I didn't know. I'd heard the word because, you know, somehow you'd heard of the Hare Krishnas, but I didn't know what it was. And I went, no. So that was just in the conversation, and then it was dropped, and we carried on talking as if nothing happened. But that happened. That was another thing that happened, which was quite strange. And then because I was going up and down the main street quite a lot, because I wasn't doing anything, so I'd go walk up the town, and just to pass the day, would walk up. And one day I was coming back, this is just, again, a few days later, and I see this guy looking at me, and I'm thinking, he looks really familiar. Now, when we were younger, not to speak about our past, we sold drugs. No, when I was a kid, I was selling drugs when I was young, 15, 16, I was selling drugs even in school, you know, cannabis, I wouldn't really class it as a drug here, but it's a drug nonetheless. It's illegal, put it that way. And so we were doing all these kind of things, and this guy, Jerry Baker, I always thought he was a real mean guy. He just used to sit and say nothing and sit there. He was the first person to give me LSD, which I'll get to that in a minute. Just his long hair, and he was just sitting, he wouldn't say very, very much, you know, and in the circle of kind of people we knew, friends, so-called friends. They were good to me. I was only young, they were a lot older. He was like, he always seemed like quite a heavy person, like dangerous person even. So I'm walking up and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, but he's got no hair. His hair's all like not shaved completely like me, like bald, but very, very short. And I thought, what's Jerry Baker? Because I haven't seen him since I was maybe 16-year-old. So this is some 6 years later. And he comes up and says, oh, how you doing, Ian? You know, and I'm saying, oh, great, Jerry. I'm really happy to see you. He looked really clear and fresh. And then we got talking. He was asking me where I'd been and all this kind of usual pleasantries, you know. And then he said to me, oh, I like your hair. Do you know what that's called? So I'm thinking, what do you mean? Do you know what it's called? It's just a ponytail, you know. He says it's called a siṁha. So then I thought Jerry's maybe went a wee bit loopy. He said it's a siṁha. And in Krishna, Lord Vishnu, he picks you up from the siṁha and takes you out the material ocean. So I'm looking at it's really funny. I'm looking at Jerry thinking Jerry's maybe lost it a little bit, because I thought maybe he just went a wee bit mad, because he always seemed a little bit mad. And that was in the middle of the conversation. He mentioned a few other things which I don't remember. I just remember him saying that to me, which was very bizarre from a person I thought was somebody else. Little did I know that I found out later that himself and another person, one of our kind of people in that association, who had been going to the temple in Scotland, had been out in book distribution on Harinam, and they were chanting Hare Krishna. So I didn't know this. I didn't know. They never told me anything when I met them. So I went on my merry way, and that was like those three instances I had were kind of like they were like kind of beginnings. When I look back, beginnings of contact from kind of not random people, but random at the time. And then what were next? Oh yeah, the LSD thing. This was very bizarre. This is not long before I stopped taking all the things I stopped, before I really started reading, came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's books. And my friend from Lancaster came up, and it was yeah, we had magic mushrooms, we had lots of them, and we were really like gone. And like I say, my mother's house was right on the edge of a whole country park and a big golf course, and so we were just on the golf course, and it was night time, and we were lost, just really lost in all the things that manifest that you when you take these kind of drugs. And I was sitting in one of the sand pits, which they got in a golf club. You have the sand pits with a bunker. It's called the bunker, but it wasn't sand; it was water, and there was fish in it, and it was really. So I'm sitting there, and it was dark.
You mean that's what you saw in your?
Yeah. I knew I was like completely off. I was off, way gone, on the mushrooms. And I looked up in the sky, and there was all these strange like beings. This is really bizarre. Now, of course, this is a hallucination, so I don't know I don't know where you are. Nobody's ever explained like reality, whether it's just in your mind or whether it's another. No, it's a dimensional thing. I don't know whether these things really exist, because you can't really tell whether it's a real or whether it's not real. But still, in my consciousness, in my eyes, there was many, many beings in the sky, but they were all bluish. Some of them had 4 hands, 4 arms, and like weird like armor and stuff on the sky. Of course, I had nothing to relate it to, because I'd never seen that imagery. I'd never seen it, so I was just thinking, what is this? It didn't feel threatening. It was just like very like unbelievably bizarre, and it only happened for a brief instant, and that was it. I got up, and I don't remember anything else for the rest of the night. But the vision, a little bit of that stuck in my mind, because it was dark. The sky was dark. It was a really clear night, and the stars were out. So the sky was just dark, and then there was all these kind of figures high in the sky, but close enough that I could see, like 50 feet or something, and there was more than one of them. So that was just very, very weird. And of course, you just put it down to the intoxication. So later on, my brother came into my room once, and he said, I was in town's Glasgow, and you call the town Glasgow. Our town, Bellsill, is not the town's Glasgow. So if you live round Glasgow and you're going to town, usually it means you're going into Glasgow. So he'd been in Glasgow, and he'd obviously met the devotees, and they gave him some books, or he bought some books, but of course he didn't read any of this kind of literature, although he was a good reader. He came and said, you'll probably read these, and he gave me these 2 books. So one was Easy Journey to Other Planets, and the other one was Perfection of Yoga, old cover, brown, with a little kind of small square picture in the middle. I think it's got Krishna on it, I can't remember. So I had these 2 books, so immediately I just started reading them, and because most of it I didn't understand, the way it was just, I understood some of it, but some of it, there was lots of verses and things, and of course when you're not familiar with the kind of language of the books, it wasn't just so familiar, but because of that I thought it was quite cool. I thought it was cool because I couldn't understand it, so it made me think, I have to read these books to try and understand what it was saying. So I had these 2 books, started reading them. So wherever I went, I took these books with me, and I would read them and read them and read them and read them, and the more I read them, the more, certain, like especially Srila Prabhupada's smaller books, there's a lot of repetition of the concepts. So the more you read it, the more you just hearing the repetition of the concepts, Guru, Krishna, these kind of things, material world is temporary, etc., etc. And the more you read, the more you start to think, and things start to click, and all the cogs start going in your head, and you start to think, it is like that actually. And then from your own experience, I'm saying from but from my own experience, I never really, everything I tried kind of failed. I tried to be famous, and I never failed, but I stepped out of it thinking the endeavour was too much. It never kind of happened, and lots of other things in life never happened. Relationships never really happened, and many kind of things never really happened. And I was always looking for something to somehow make me whole. That was it, to think, that's it. And once I've got that's it, I don't have to worry about any other that's it's. I won't be deviated to any other things. I was always looking for that. I guess it makes it simple for me to think, there's this thing, and that's what the thing is, and I don't have to worry about any other things. So that makes my life really, really simple, and I think that's what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was, although the process isn't so easy, but it is simple. So again, like I had these 2 books, And I thought, okay, I'll read them. I was still doing my Omen and things. And then one day, this all happened within the space of like a month. It wasn't like a long period. This is a very short period that everything happened. You know, I met those three people. There was this kid and my ex-girlfriend friend and Jerry Baker, and then I got the books. And then a few days later, I was up our town Bellsill, and because I was reading a lot, there was a jumbo sale. There's a indoor market called Aladdin's. Anybody ever sees this video from Bellsill and they're older, Aladdin's, and they had like stalls. It was a market, and I went straight to the bookstall. So I'm looking at the books. You know, I used to read science fiction and fantasy and different things like that as well. You know, and I picked the first book I picked up. Underneath was Science Self-Realization, the hardback, but it didn't have the glossy cover. That was off, and it was 10 pence. 10 pence. So at that point, I stopped to think, maybe this isn't. I didn't believe in coincidence. I think things were meant to unfold. I didn't believe, just things happen just because. I had a feeling that in myself always that things happen for a reason, you know, without any philosophical background. It was just sentiment, but that's what I thought. So when I saw that's when it clicked for me, when I had the Science Self-Realization. Well, it could have been any Prabhupada's books, but I had this. Previous to that, I had another girlfriend. This is a wee bit in between, and at that time, and her brother was a friend. I met him first, and I met her. And when I was in his room, on his bookshelf, I noticed one of Prabhupada's books. I says, "Well, can I have this book?" He says, "Yeah, take it. I'm not reading it." And it was the Science Self-Realization, the silver, the softback, the silver one. You know, science. No. Reincarnation, coming back. So that was a real eye opener, because reincarnation, it was like that kind of struck home, because I had this real fear of death. So for me, thinking, there is no actual death. There's only change of body. Although it's in the other books, the coming back is, how can I say, that's just what it's about, and it gives lots of examples. So I was really enthused by that. So there I had 3 books in the space